Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And in this video, I wanted to do a more relaxed video. So make sure you guys grab your snacks, popcorn, drinks. This is going to be a longer one. So in today's video, I wanted to explain why we need T-Mobile. It's not that a lot of people are just, favoring T-Mobile. Some people say that I favor T-Mobile. It's not really about who's favorite carrier. It's more about us as consumers in today's market needing T-Mobile. So the article that I have up today is from Yahoo Finance. This is a placeholder. I will leave a link to it in the description for those of you who may have not seen it. T-Mobile recently announced that they are lighting up 4-carrier aggregation on its 5G network. So why do we need T-Mobile? And I think many of you will grasp the concept that T-Mobile, of course, is needed in the market for competitive purpose. But we really need T-Mobile from a scale perspective to keep Verizon and AT&T honest, for one, to keep them on their toes. And in the future, if us as consumers want Verizon and AT&T to stop increasing their pricing, we need T-Mobile to really go big to scale. That's why we need T-Mobile. We need them in the marketplace today to compete against the big two mobile network operators. And let's call them what they are. Let's not beat around the bush. Even after, even post-merger now with Sprint, almost 3 years or a little over 3 years, T-Mobile is still punching well above their weight. Let's be honest. If there was, and I'm just using an example, if there was a big low and mid-band auction coming up, let's say in the next 2 months, and it was a free-for-all bidding, Verizon and AT&T would still severely outbid T-Mobile in that type of bidding. And I'm just using that as an example in terms of purchasing power. Yes, T-Mobile could do more. They could pull more from the debt market. But again, they're still punching above their weight. T-Mobile still, to this day, even if they wanted it to, they still couldn't produce a $18, $19, $20 billion capex and maintain the same type of net income and free cash flow that we've recently saw in the last 2 quarters. Ain't happening. If T-Mobile did a yearly capex of $18, $19, $20 billion, T-Mobile would go broke. Their net income would be negative. Their free cash flow would be negative. They would be operating at a loss if their capex was that high. Just to put that into perspective, how much T-Mobile is really punching above their weight. I think that's something that we fail to discuss. They're doing a lot with a little. Right? They have competing spectrum position. So I get that. They do have that, and they got that from the Sprint deal. They have a competing low band position. So I understand that 600 was a big deal for them, because it allowed them to gain somewhat of wideband channels on low band. So on average, in that auction, they gained 31 megahertz of low band, which was a big deal. That's something that Verizon really can't compete with on a national scale. Yes, they got some 850, but it's not nationally. And in the rest of the country where they have low band, it's only 10 by 10 band 13. There are a lot of parts of this country where T-Mobile can go 15 by 15 and 20 by 20 on low band. And I think that's a pretty big deal. So the need for T-Mobile in this market today is bigger than ever, right? Dish is rarely doing anything, competition-wise. They continue losing customers on a quarterly basis. Before I start making videos about Dish, by the way, for those of you who may be interested in that, I want to see them come out with a more solid plan, right? They still don't have a plan around evolving around retail, at least a bigger plan. There's really no bigger plan around marketing. They have some marketing, but it's unclear as to what they're pushing, right? Boost Mobile, Boost Infinite, both the same brand. There's just a lot of confusion there, and the network is not really scaled to anything super competitive just yet. So I'm waiting to see something more satisfying to where I can confidently make videos without there being more questions than answers. So I'm waiting on that. But as it stands today, T-Mobile is needed the most to keep AT&T and Verizon on their toes. And each and every quarter, they are doing just that, right? When they grow and the ratios favor T-Mobile, it has AT&T and Verizon looking more and more and more as to what they need to do to slow down T-Mobile's growth. And that's a good thing for us. That's a good thing for the consumer. So again, from my point of view, it's not much of a fanboy thing or a favorite carrier. We really need T-Mobile to compete at scale against the two biggest, largest mobile network operators in Verizon and AT&T. And that's networking and retail distribution. Right? I watched the video last night. They haven't updated to a newer pop number yet, and I'm sure it's a little bigger by now. But T-Mobile, as of 2020, they were covering 265 million pops of their LTE footprint. So their LTE footprint was at like 326 million pops. So again, they still have a lot of pops to catch up to their existing current native footprint. So they still have a lot of work to do. I would say maybe today with all the new stores that are opening, T-Mobile might be at 290 million pops covered with retail. Might be a good question to ask from analysts at the next conferences that are coming up or at the next quarterly earnings. That's something to note, right? If they do answer that question. So that's why we really need T-Mobile. We really need T-Mobile to stand out, to continue competing aggressively in the marketplace, and to make smart strategic moves. That's why I still stand by my opinion that US Cellular would be a very smart and strategic move. Again, T-Mobile is punching above their weight. Like I said, they're spending $9 to $10 billion on an annual run rate. That's they said after the initial spending on CapEx for the merger integration, they would go down. They would step down to the $9 to $10 billion, and that's what they would remain at. If you really put that into perspective, as a standalone, T-Mobile was spending between $5 to $6 billion. So that's only between $4 to $5 billion more that they're spending now as a merged company than they were as a standalone company. So that's not. I mean, of course, $4 to $5 billion is a lot more money, but that's not like a significant separation between the merged company now and the standalone company, and it's most certainly not anywhere close to what their two biggest competitors are spending. Yes, I get it. I understand Verizon and AT&T, they split up their CapEx differently, right? They have other business units that they're funding. They got fiber that they're funding, so I understand that. But from that point of view, when would T-Mobile even be in a financial position to fund their own fiber build to the sites? Right? That's something to also discuss. And I looked at the numbers financially. I did the math. I tried to flip it and spin it. But no matter how I did it, if T-Mobile today spent $17, $18, $19 billion on their capital investment into the network, they would be operating at a loss across the board. Their EBITDA would be shot. Their service revenues would be shot probably. Their free cash flow would be done. Their net income would be in the negatives. So they are yet again, even as a merged company, punching above their weight. They were already punching above their weight when they were a standalone company. They were going after much bigger aspirations than they were actually able to obtain, if you will. And now they're doing it again. But now they're doing it again with more resources and more money to spend, right? They got more spectrum now. They got more money to spend. So eventually, as time goes on, if they continue executing against their plan, eventually they will be able to spend 13, 14, 15 billion dollars in free cash flow and still maintain solid net income and solid free cash flow. I mean, capital, right? Eventually they will be able to spend 13, 14, 15 billion dollars in capital expenditures for the year on the network and maintain a positive free cash flow and net income. Eventually that will come. As they continue gaining share and executing against their strategy, it will come. But today is not that day. It's just not. 2020, the end of 2023, it will look better. The end of 2024, it will look better. And then end of 2025, when they get to that, 18 plus billion dollars of free cash flow, now we're talking. Now T-Mobile could go to 12, 13 billion CapEx for the year and it not affect them in the slightest, right? They would step down a little bit on free cash flow, but they would probably still be in the 14, 15, 16 billion dollar range free cash flow, which is plenty, right? And then, maybe in the 2026, 2027 outlook, we get maybe some owner economics around fiber. It'll come eventually. I'm here going on record today. The leasing model moving forward won't be sustainable for T-Mobile. Let's just call it what it is. Right? You got 5G Advanced coming. You got the transition into 6G, where they're talking about terahertz. T-Mobile is talking about a separate capital spend for millimeter wave potentially. Then T-Mobile eventually will have to transition at some point to dark fiber. Right now they're using lit fiber. So eventually the owner economics are just going to make too much sense. From a leasing perspective, I've been speaking with some Verizon and AT&T engineers, and they tell me they know it doesn't make sense because they operate a certain part of their network on a third-party basis. There's a high percentage that they have their own fiber, but there's still a good chunk of it that's not on their own fiber. And they tell me these contracts that they're doing now, going up from 1 gig to 10 gig, or maybe going from 500 megabits to a gig. It's not cheap, especially as you get more suburban and you get more rural. The choices of fiber providers get slim to none, and then you're kind of at the mercy of what they charge. You can't really negotiate much because there's no other choices. So you kind of, like I said, you're kind of at the mercy of having to pay whatever that fiber provider wants you to pay. And that's something that T-Mobile doesn't really talk about much. Right now, a lot of the leasing that they do within the top 100 markets probably does favor them because there's a lot of optionality. So if they have a deal in place with a fiber provider and that contract is out, and now they go to another fiber provider and they get a better deal, they can switch, right? And they can present that deal to the current fiber provider, and the fiber provider that they currently have, they might match that deal. So that's how T-Mobile kind of maneuvers, and they're kind of flexible in that regard. But as you go more suburban, more rural, all of that goes out the window. So this is just a video that I made to more or less explain why we really need T-Mobile. We really need T-Mobile to compete fiercely, to keep Verizon and AT&T from raising their prices. And as of yet, right, Verizon and AT&T are still raising their prices on grandfathered plans. And it seems like they will continue to do that. So T-Mobile needs to do more, I feel. The 760,000 postpaid ads they had in Q2 is not enough. If Verizon and AT&T are still raising their prices on each line, Verizon was $3 to $5. AT&T recently, I think, did $2.50 for the Elite. If they still have the balls to do that, then T-Mobile is not doing enough, in my opinion. That means there's more that they can do. There's some tweaking on the marketing. There's more scale to gain. There's more retail distribution that they need to add in. They need to act aggressively. If I was the CEO of T-Mobile, right? If I was Mike Sievert and I saw the news that Verizon and AT&T were raising their pricing again, I would immediately call a staff meeting with all my senior executives. And I would tell them on the board, this is a problem. If these guys are still raising prices today, that means we as a company are not competitive enough. We need to raise up the competitive pressure against them to stop them from doing that. If I, as a CEO, I see them stopping to raise their pricing, and in fact, maybe making corrections, lowering prices, whatever the case may be, then as the CEO of T-Mobile, I would feel satisfied. Then I know, okay, my competitive pressure is enough now where I'm really making them compete against me. And now I got to watch my back because now I got to see what their response is. That's when I know I'm doing enough. But for me to continuously see Verizon continue to raise their pricing, AT&T to raise their pricing, makes me feel like, as a content creator of mobile wireless networks, it's making me feel like, looking from the outside in, that Verizon and AT&T still don't really see T-Mobile as a big threat. And I think nearing the end of 2023, a little more than 3 years into the merger, I think that could still be perceived as a problem. If T-Mobile was really taking all that share and they were really just slamming the ratios, Verizon and AT&T would not be raising prices again. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure Mike Sievert knows how to run that business very well, but I just think that would be something that would trigger me as the CEO. And like I said, I would be calling staff meetings left and right, and I would try to figure out, okay, what next Un-carrier move do we need to launch to keep these guys from raising their price? So let me know what you think about that in the comment section down below. Again, I'm just putting it out there. We really need T-Mobile for those purposes. If not, everyone is just going to keep raising prices, and then we're all stuck paying more. So make sure you guys stay tuned for more. Like, share, subscribe. Follow my social media outlets. This is Tyrone with Tech Life. See y'all in the next one. Peace.